Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again with another edition of starter builds for a new league. This time around it's Heist League. With Heist League we've been given a few new skills, a few reworked skills, and plenty of still old established stuff from the last league, including Warcry Slam stuff. Now, let me just start out by saying I'm getting way too old for this shit. It's like 8 hours before the start of the league. I lost an entire day thanks to a hangover from the fucking patch note stream, and I just then had to catch up on climbing, make all the starter builds, and then start recording this thing and still finalize cosplay and all of that. So yeah, I'm struggling here. At this point, there's more than enough people out there making starter builds and videos and guides and streams and all that you can easily pick something from someone that put a whole lot more work into their builds than I did, at least for the starting point. Either way, I will still do my best to give you a few little builds here right now, and also probably tell you what I've picked, which I think is kind of Hexblast and all that. But either way, let's get straight into it. So we may as well roll straight into the first build, which is one I played as my second character of last league, and that is Earthshatter Chieftain. If you've yet to try something with slams with Earthshatter as a chieftain, it's pretty damn smooth. Right from the get-go, it's not very expensive. It scales really nicely early on, as Marauders typically do, because they have lots of good damage nodes right at the start, and Earthshatter's a pretty early skill. You can start getting your Warcries in early and getting a feel for the playstyle nice and quick. It does do decently in the end game. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it is of course a starter build, and I think it's a very reliable character to pick. You can try out some other slam skills too. It doesn't have to be Earthshatter. You can try things like Ground Slam, Sunder, Tectonic Slam. Yep, and it's just going to be based around the Kongor's Undying Rage mace, which is a mace that just has a decent amount of fizz, and then hits cannot be evaded, so you don't have to worry about accuracy, and it's a pretty easy weapon to get early into the game. So let's rip into how to play this character, but there is of course a really big video, or a couple of videos that I made earlier in the league for this one. So this is my old character, pretty much one for one from the Harvest League, which was wearing just crap gear, basically nothing. Very achievable. The only real kind of problem is a Kongor's mace, but until you get that, you just run some pretty low tier crappy maces, and then eventually once you get this, it takes care of your accuracy. So you probably want to actually roll with Resolute Technique rather early on to fix your accuracy, and then once you can get closer to accuracy or higher level, need a bit more damage, pick up Elemental Overload, and then of course get the mace on, and you should have pretty reliable Elemental Overload procs. But while leveling, it's pretty important to be going for the Warcry nodes. The Warcry nodes are what's going to make it feel much smoother once you get much better cast speed on those things, duration on them, and it's basically just a big old-fashioned mash of Warcry, 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 Earthshatter, and rotate that in. It's pretty reliable, consistent, and nothing huge on damage, but it will get you into mid and early game. Early end game, and your first 2 points should probably be Tawa Forest Strength, because it essentially gives you an additional slam that's pretty close to double your damage at the very early game, and then beyond that it's kind of anyone's guess. You can go Namahu's, you can get some more endurance, you can get some defense, you can even go a little bit more damage if you really want. And as for our links, we're definitely looking for as soon as you can, a Fist of War. It's a level 38 gem, but once you can get it, it feels a lot chunkier to get you these big extra large slam hits. Otherwise, everything else pretty stock standard. Do whatever you want there. Ruthless early on, Inspiration for mana cost, early damage. Can also use melee fizz instead of a conk effect, for example. But it's a pretty easy character, kind of builds itself. Passive tree, very straightforward. Like I said, just make sure you're grabbing some Warcry nodes as you go. And your cluster jewel, currently all I've got here is a minus fire exposure one, because it was tough to get them early on, but if you can get minus fire while ignited, or corpse destroyed on kill, that'd be pretty sweet too. Otherwise, yeah, there is more information on this type of character in the videos that I made for him when I played him. So let's move straight into the next one. The next one I show off and talk about is going to be highly provisional because it is the new curse stuff, Impending Doom and Hexblast. They both seem to have some potential. Impending Doom, more of just an additional sort of clear but not really the central focus, and Hexblast being the central focus where you want to stack up some Doom and then try and choose a certain direction to go with, whether fire, cold, lightning, and use curses towards that end. Once I started to put the passive tree together and look at the skills more closely, kind of decided that I think this would be the most interesting thing for me to do right from the start. I have absolutely no confidence in its ability to be amazing in the end game, but it looks really interesting to play around with, and I definitely want to be on the forefront of testing for you guys on this one because I think it's got the most potential to surprise us, but as well as that, could fall short and be completely flaccid, so I have to go in and figure this one out on day one so that I can then pass on some more concrete information. But I'll give you guys a quick overview of how I think I'm going to try and build it, and maybe you can follow along while I'm doing it. Now, as I said, it's going to be highly provisional, so it's hard. There's no real even path of building to import it into at the moment, so both of my setups have Dark Pact in place of them, but this is supposed to be the Hexblast setup, and then this is supposed to be the Impending Doom setup. And the idea behind this skill, if you haven't really had a look at it, is Hexblast is going to be just a big beam of chaos that comes down, but all of the damage can then ignite, freeze, or shock, and that will depend on your chances to ignite, freeze, and shock, and what kind of damage you're going to convert into. So it is originally chaos damage, but essentially it says chaos damage is going to be, with hits, is resisted by lowest resistance instead. So instead of being chaos, it's still going to be chaos, but it'll be based off of other resist types. So if we have lots of conductivity and LE weakness, for example, it should be more of a lightning hit. It's not necessarily a lightning hit, still chaos, but it'll be scaling off of that resist, and it's kind of weird and funky. And in this context, I'm going to try and use both Frostbite and LE weakness to then have it do mostly cold and have some big cold hits. And you can see it's got some pretty potent stuff when comboed with Doom, and Doom is a new mechanic that's going to be stacking when you self-curse things. So it goes up to, I think, 44 Doom if you have all the right passive tree stuff. But the idea for me is that I'm going to kind of run around with Frostbite and Temp Chains on a Blasphemy, so things are always cursed, so there's no Doom in regards to any of that. But we then LE weakness manually over various enemies and packs, and that stacks up Doom real quick, and that will also have Impending Doom, which will be another explosion effect, going off at the same time once you run out of Doom from the LE weakness. But you cast LE weakness, and then if you really need to, drop in the Hexblast straight away after that, and it should do a big chunk of damage. That's my theory on it. I think that's how it works. I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid and I can't read anymore, but it seems like I'm going to give it a shot like that. It may even have some flammability potential where you can just go pure ignite base, or in, I guess, best possible scenario, you're kind of lightning base and then have big shocks on enemies too. That might be worth looking into too. But currently this is all I've got, just kind of a basic setup there. I'm going to be Starves, I'm going to be an Occultist, though there's nothing that really about this means you have to be a Occultist. I think you could also do something like an Assassin, and simply put, you won't be quite as percent affected on your curses, but otherwise it's possibly more damage, possibly a smoother playstyle. We'll see how it goes. I'm just going to give it a shot, and we don't actually get the skill till level 28, so I'm probably going to have to level with like Contagion, Essence Drain or something. I don't know, we'll figure it out when we get there. Now, up until I decided on the whole Hexblast thing, my idea was to go Blazing Salvo Totems. I feel like there's going to be good totem synergy there because the totems by default will choose if they want to attack things further away and then give you that extra spread, or if you want to just surround an enemy or a boss with your totems, it should then localize and do some really good single target. I'd also like to try out some other totem stuff. I'll see if Crackling Lance works. The Intensified does not work on totems, so potentially the inherent intensifying crackling lance shouldn't work, but it'd be something I'd just test real quick. And then besides that, I also wouldn't mind chucking Firestorm on the totems and seeing how it looks to dump a whole bunch of Armageddon meteorites from the sky with our totems. But I think the idea for this build is definitely Blazing Salvo attached to totems as a Hierophant, and I'm using my Dark Pact totem base because that was a pretty damn reliable character. It had very good defense and offense figured out, and I'm just using that same passive tree, same sort of template, but we're going with Blazing Salvo, and the main difference is that we want to use a Splinter Jewel just for 2 extra proj, and ideally go for a Dying Sun in the end as well. Now it is a pretty rough outline of a tree, but what I have done is basically take my previous Dark Pact character and then cut a bunch of the stats on the gear in half, or take away a few of the key things, because it was harvest crafted, it was much better stats, so it should be a bit more basic. And as well as that, I've just replaced Dark Pact with Magma Orb at the moment, since you don't have Blazing Salvo in the POB, but AoE, projectile, fire, all that, very similar sort of just base skill, so you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. But the idea with Blazing Salvo is that you're going to be actually firing off 6 projectiles. I think we got the thing here still. 6 projectiles to start with, but it's got a fairly small amount of damage, so the overlap does end up mattering a lot. But the more projectiles you can get into it, the more important it'll be for single target. So you might want to play around with things like Fork as well. Maybe that's going to be a big single target increase, but at the moment, the best I can do with no real testing, no real gear or anything, is going to be just make sure you try and chuck a Rain of Splinters in, because that's going to be 2 additional projectiles right there. A Dying Sun will be another 2. There's probably a Helm Enchant for even more as well. So if you can like double that count, you're already dealing double the base of that skill. And totems, you can have up to 6 of them, so ideally you go for these as soon as you can and try and become a totem build as soon as you can. And placing down all your totems should create an absolute massacre. But the main issue I see with this build is that Blazing Salvo might have a bit of travel speed to the enemies, so you might want to get some projectile speed if you feel like you need to on your wand, so that you actually connect with the enemies just a little bit faster. But there's a bit of experimenting to go here, and you can probably you can turn this generic template of a totem build into just about any skill you want. Without this cluster jewel, which we're just trying to make a basic fire one of, without this cluster jewel, it is just a template for a totem build that has no specific requirements, no affinities for any element, so you can try out other lightning skills, cold skills, Dark Pact, whatever the hell you want, and see what you like. And then lastly, there was a rework of the steel skills that we have, that is Shattering Steel, Lancing Steel, and we've been given a new one in the form of Splitting Steel. And I do want to give you a template from one of my previous characters of Harvest League once again, and that is the Lancing Steel and Spectral Throw Impale Gladiator that was using a Savior, but I don't think at this point has to at all. And you can try out Lancing Steel and the new Steel skill, which is Splitting Steel, right from level 1. Go as a champion. It's pretty basic setup, just trying to be crit swords. In these previews, they do kind of want you to do two-handers, so maybe you're going to be kind of throttled by the amount of blades and impale things you can stack up, so possibly faster attacks and dual wielding stuff isn't the way to go, but currently it definitely is. If you want to be crit and if you want to be a champion, you get some good foils and go to town with all of your impale stacking. There's a big video that I had for the previous character. Lancing Steel went really well with a Fury Valve, especially if you can get that, but I'm not sure we'll need it this time around based off of the new skills. We have to wait and see. But there's plenty of information on the previous character, the previous videos, if you want to check those out. Otherwise, I'll just do my best to give you a little bit of information right here. So the previous character was a gladiator and it was based around block. With this one, I've just kind of repurposed it to be a champion, taken away a lot of the block nodes and taken a bit more life nodes instead, so that you just take a few of those extra hits. But the DPS should be quite a bit better because we are actually impale stacking this time around and getting some good value out of the impales for that additional physical damage too. With a champion, you don't need to really focus too much on hit, because as soon as you taunt something, it cannot be or it can't evade your attacks any longer, so that's a 100% chance to hit. Ideally, your first 2 points are probably Master of Metal, then you're going into Conqueror and Worthy Foe for Merklab. Passive tree is pretty straightforward. Like I said, currently it's dual wield. Maybe it's going to feel better to do slower hits, and you would be trying out all 3 of the steel skills as you go, though you do get splitting steel at level 1, so that's pretty damn convenient, and hopefully it feels rather good. Not too much else to say there. Originally it was with a savior, now it's just some decent foils. I tried my best to cut out a bit of stats there, and it was originally using an explosion chest. Obviously you probably won't be getting one quite this good in the new league, so it's not strictly necessary to have an explosion chest. It just made things feel a little bit nicer for clear and aesthetics purposes. But this type of build doesn't really need an explosion chest, I think, and I did use a Fury Valve last time around, but it's going to be a bit harder to get one of those early on, so keep that in mind. And then of course Watcher's Eye here with double damage on Pride, not that important. You can get a crappy jewel that won't really make too much of a difference otherwise. And yeah, try out the skills, see how you go. Maybe Lancing Steel or Shattering Steel, or the new one, all of a sudden feel a lot better with the Impale revamp. That's about it from me. I need a bit of sleep and to keep stressing out about this new league launch. As always, very stressful time for me, very nerve-wracking. Is it going to be good? Am I going to make a dick of myself? Probably. We'll have to wait and see, eh? Hopefully it all goes well. Hope you guys enjoy the new league launch and your characters go very well. I'm gonna most likely try the Occultist Hexblast shit because it seems very experimental and quite fun. And we'll have a bit of a cosplay in the morning. I will be logging on 1 hour before the start of the league, and that's when we'll get things kicked off and start making a total ass of ourselves. Just me. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you next time.